Hello Bloomington, I'm Mayor Tim Busse, and this is the Council Minute for the week of June 14th. This week's meeting featured an update on the City Council's strategic plan. We're calling these updates Mission Moments because they are highlighting intentional efforts being made to advance our strategic plan and to improve our community. The focus for this mission moment was engagement and transparency, presented by two members of the city's Community Outreach and Engagement Division, Amanda Crombie and Tracy Smith. Amanda and Tracy shared what is driving our outreach team. Their mission is involving community and influencing greatness. They're striving to be bold and innovative in designing the public participation process. In other words, continuing to find creative and meaningful ways to involve the community in the work that the city does with and for the community. Our engagement experts shared some of the core values they've adopted for public participation. Among them, public participation is based on the belief that those who are affected by a decision have the right to be involved in the decision-making process. And public participation includes the promise that the public's contribution will influence the decision, and we will communicate to participants how their input affected that decision. When we're starting a project, our engagement team will work with staff and the council using something called the Spectrum of Engagement, and is developed by the International Association of Public Participation, or the IAP2. And it's used to determine what level of public participation is appropriate for that project. The spectrum ranges from inform, where we provide project updates, to involve, where we work with shareholders to ensure that concerns and ideas are directly reflected in the alternatives developed, to empower, where the group can actually make the final decision. So, how does this work in practice? Let me use as an example the Community Budget Advisory Committee from last year. Our staff laid out the process for how the committee was going to do the work that the council asked them to do. Staff and council committed to the participation model Collaborate, where the committee members, 9 residents, were entrusted to shape the options and recommendations, and the staff and council committed to incorporate that advice into the final decision to the maximum extent possible. And in the end, that's exactly how it worked. The residents developed 3 different options for how the city would solve our budget challenge during the pandemic, and the council ended up adopting one of those options with relatively few changes. For the City Council and for our staff, the most important part of our commitment to community engagement is being thoughtful and clear on the front end of our projects about how we're going to involve community in the process and the decisions being made. I am grateful that we have excellent technical experts in our Community Outreach and Engagement Division assisting the council and the city staff as we continue to improve. The City Council passed a resolution on Monday night requesting state support for 2 major building projects in Bloomington: the renovation of the Bloomington Ice Garden and construction of a new public health facility. You might remember a couple of years ago, before COVID, when we could do large community gatherings, the City Council hosted a number of town hall forums around Bloomington. One of the important pieces of information we shared was about the work our staff and the council are doing to make sure that city facilities are modernized. 2 of the city-owned buildings in the most need of attention are Public Health and BIG, the Bloomington Ice Garden. The action by the council this week is the first step in the process to ask the state of Minnesota to provide funding support for those projects. Every 2 years, the Minnesota legislature has what's called a bonding session. The governor and legislators focus on capital improvement projects around the state of Minnesota that will be paid for with the sale of bonds. Now, for a local project to be considered, it has to meet the criteria of having regional benefit or impact. Both of the Bloomington projects definitely meet that regional test. Our public health division in Bloomington is part of a 3-city consortium with Richfield and Edina, serving a population of nearly 180,000 people in our 3 communities. BIG is one of the busiest ice arenas in Minnesota, renting over 9,000 hours of ice time for hockey and figure skating, hosting over 24 hockey tournaments every year, and numerous figure skating events. It is a destination for skaters from around the metro and around the state. The first sheet of ice at BIG was built in 1970, with 2 additions in 1974 and 1993. The refrigeration system needs to be replaced, as does the roof. And the whole facility is in need of repair and modernization, including alterations to take Rink 3 from an Olympic-sized sheet of ice, which limits its use, to a standard-sized sheet of ice. Our public health building, frankly, is in need of replacement. A couple of years ago, we had programmed space in a new community center for public health offices and programs. And with planning for a new community center not moving forward, we need to address public health. Built in 1960, the Public Health Office is too small for the 50 employees, and with staff and customers, they are cramped into less than half the size of square footage needed for the services provided. And it's not well designed for client and program services. It's also the worst building among more than a dozen city facilities for energy inefficiency, and the age of the mechanical systems make it increasingly difficult to get parts to keep it maintained. Now, asking the state of Minnesota to help fund these projects recognizes that we are serving a community beyond Bloomington, and it will lessen the burden on Bloomington taxpayers. We're looking forward to sharing the Bloomington story with the governor and the legislature in the next legislative session in 2022. For many months now, I've been providing updates on the work we've been doing to develop a park system master plan to guide the future development and use of our parks and natural spaces for our current and for our future generations of Bloomington residents. On Monday night, the City Council took public comment on the draft master plan document. Now, a public hearing was not required for this process, but we have been very intentional about public participation throughout the master planning process, and we wanted to make sure that the whole community had an opportunity before the document is finalized and presented for adoption. Over the past year and a half, the City Council and the Parks, Arts, and Recreation Commission, with assistance from staff and consultants, have reviewed numerous concepts, studies, and data on local and national trends in parks and recreation. They've looked at community demographics and facility needs. We've looked at current and future programming needs, maintenance standards, long-term sustainability, environmentally, financially, and socially, and we have strongly considered how issues of equity influence our decision-making. Most importantly, we consistently considered the information gathered from the community during this process. The draft of the master plan has 4 sections. The first section is about the vision, mission, and guiding principles we have as a community for our park system. The second section looks at our assets with eyes on both the history of how our system was built and the needs that exist as a result of the changing community and user expectations. The third section gets into what we heard from residents about what they want and how local and regional trends are influencing the evolution of how our park system functions. And finally, the fourth section of the master plan lays out an approach and an action plan for capital improvements to achieve our vision. And that vision is to have an accessible system of vibrant parks, diverse recreational facilities, sustainable park resources, and engaging recreation programs and experiences that contribute to healthy individuals and families, a thriving economy, and a high quality of life in Bloomington. By the way, you can still provide input on the draft Park System Master Plan. Comments are being taken through Monday, June 21st on the city's website. Check out the master plan, and please do take the time to look at it, review it, and then tell us what you think. We are truly appreciative of all the public input we've received over the last year and a half. Our staff and consultants will be reviewing these last rounds of comments to see if any changes need to be made to the draft, and we're expecting to bring forward a final document for adoption on August 2nd. Well, that's a wrap on this week's Council Minute. I hope to see you again next week. Until then, stay safe, Bloomington.